Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to PALS TV, Season 12. It's our Wednesday edition. Love seeing everyone on here, and we'll continue to bring you a great lineup, wide variety of topics. This morning, we'll start out in Steubenville here shortly with Amanda. Then we'll head over to Licking County and join our friends at Together We Grow near Heath. Then we'll head back over to Eastern Ohio and spend our lunchtime hour with Harrison County, and then finish it out with our Columbus group and do a little dance party and have some fun to end our day. So it's going to be a lot of fun, like it normally is. We'll continue to do some of our breakout sessions here and allow you to socialize a little bit in between the segments if you'd like, and hang out with one another. Remember, if you want to go back in the previous episodes we've had here on PALS TV, those are up on our either website underneath the PALS TV tab, or if you went just directly to YouTube and search for PALS TV episodes, Jonah has done a pretty good job of making sure that those are uploaded frequently. So we're a little bit behind on our website, but if you go to the YouTube channel, you can find some of the more recent seasons we put on here on PALS TV. So Season 12, we're catching a lot of people now with the number of seasons we've been able to put together here. I said it early on that it's fun keeping track of how long some of these different shows lasted for and how we've passed a lot of them. I pulled them up a couple episodes ago, but I'll go through them again. Blacklist only made it 7 seasons. Glee made it 6 seasons. X Factor was 3 seasons. The OC, I think that was an MTV one, 4 seasons. Game of Thrones, it's one of my favorites. I went that on 8 seasons. That finished last year, 2019. Gotham's been on for 6 seasons now. It's a show, I believe, on Fox. One of Jonah's favorites, Silicon Valley. That's been on for 6 seasons now. Ballers finished up their last season. I think it was 6 seasons long. Empire was 6 seasons long. Las Vegas, the season was 5 seasons. Sopranos went on for 6 seasons and just ended when the screen went to black, which is crazy. House of Cards was been on for 6 seasons, and Veep for 7 seasons. We passed a couple of my favorites most recently that went on for 9 seasons. Seinfeld went on for 9. The Office went on for 9. Jess was a big Adventures of Superman that went on for 6 seasons. We're still trying to catch Kristen's favorite, Supernatural, which has been on for 15 seasons. So that's very impressive that the show could make it that long. Siren's been on for 3 seasons. SpongeBob SquarePants went on for 12 seasons. So we're equaling SpongeBob this year. And Big Bang Theory, that's another one of Caitlin's favorites that went on for 12 seasons. So we will be equal to the Big Bang Theory on Friday after we wrap up season 12. Modern Family went on for 11 seasons. Stranger Things, it's one of Caitlin's favorites as well. That's coming up on season 4, right, Caitlin? Actually, hold on one second, Caitlin. Let me see.
Yeah, season 4.
They're about to start season 4, right?
I really don't know when.
Oh, they have. I was going to ask you that if they've released.
The coronavirus.
Oh, because of the pandemic and everything, It's been back a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's going to be the last one, I think.
And it normally came out in the summertime, right? Isn't that when they release their seasons, during the summer?
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, I've watched it. That's a pretty good show. It's more sci-fi. So for those of you that are into the sci-fi side of things, the alternate universe. It's pretty cool though. It's a good story. It's interesting. So where we leave off, Stranger Things has been on for 3, about to go on to their 4th. Most recently, I watched Parks and Rec. I have not watched Parks and Rec until the last few months, and I went back and watched some of those seasons. They're good. It's a pretty good show. That went on for 7 seasons. Let's see, Perry Mason. That was Alan's favorite show from back in the day. Perry Mason. It's been on for 9 seasons from 1957 to 1966. Love It or List It was on for 12 seasons, so we'll catch them this year too. Alex, shout out to you, buddy. Ghostbusters, big Ghostbusters fan over there. And the real Ghostbusters cartoon, because there was never really a TV series, but they did put on a cartoon, and that went on for 7 seasons in the late 80s, early 90s. So, yeah, good stuff. But I see that Amanda has jumped on. Amanda,
hi, everyone.
Joining us. And now we'll head over to Steubenville and hang out with Amanda for a little while.
Hi, guys. So we are going to be finishing Balto today. We started it last week. All kinds of good stuff. So we're at the point of Balto. We're on chapter 9. Leading up to this, Alex, you were on there a lot of last week. What are you were on there last week when we read Balto. And like I said, we're going to finish it up. What are some things that happened last week in Balto, Alex?
You give me a clue.
Okay, so last week in Balto, we found out that the town of Nome, Alaska is having a diphtheria outbreak. And it was up to Balto and several other sled dog teams to go and get this necessary medicine to Nome, Alaska, so they could heal everyone and help everyone. So we're in chapter 9. The medicine, I believe, just got to Balto. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to finish reading Balto. Okay, can you guys see Balto, the book on there? Okay. Let me drag y'all over here. Okay. Hold on, I gotta fix this. Ah! Okay, chapter 9. Bluff Solomon and Port Safety. Everyone can see chapter 9 and the snowflakes on the screen, right? Okay, want to make sure. Bluff was strangely silent. It was late in the evening and both men and dogs had eaten their fill at dinner. Once again, all of Bluff's lights were left on in hopes that Charlie Olson's team might soon arrive. Unknown to the people there, the weather near Nome had gotten bad. Some of the telegraph lines were down. In Bluff, Balto's loud barking broke the silence. Gunner Kassan heard it and rushed outside. Balto and the rest of the team were on their feet, sniffing the air. Their ears were straight and high. There could be no mistake. Olson's team must be closing in. Sure enough, minutes later, Olson's panting dogs trotted into Bluff. Within minutes, they were surrounded by people. Olson gave Kassan what little information he had as Kassan slipped his dogs into their harnesses. According to plan, Kassan was to drive through Solomon, where there was a working telegraph so he could get the latest news. He would then head to Port Safety, where the final musher would be waiting. The serum was warmed and the men worked quickly, tying the crate onto Kassan's sled. Oh. The race hadn't been won yet. Nome was barely 60 miles away, but some difficult land lay in between. The men gave Kassan their good wishes, and Olson reminded him to keep the serum warm. Balto leaned forward in his harness, straining to be on his way. He leaned without being told in the direction of Nome. He remembered what they had left behind in that town and why they needed to return. It was exactly 10 o'clock at night. The temperature was dropping. With Gunner Kassan bringing up the rear, the team set into the darkness, unaware of a howling blizzard that raged only miles ahead. So right here, you see the sled dogs. They're loading up the stuff, the serum, and he's getting the dogs ready, getting them all hooked up into their harnesses. As the lead dog pulled forward, Gunner Kassan's eyes slowly became used to the darkness. The dogs set a quick pace after 2 days of waiting, and they warmed to the exercise. Gripping the handlebars of the sled as it skated over the path, Kassan imagined what the landscape looked like in daylight. The relay was going well, but there was no room for mistakes. He wanted to be prepared for anything. The trip to port safety followed the coastline, sometimes snaking out over the sea ice. This was the Seaward Peninsula, the western extension of Alaska on which Nome sits. This area of Alaska is almost completely bare of trees. The landscape is harsh, rocky, and totally exposed to the elements. Sledding at the very edge of the coast put Balto and the team in the teeth of the vicious winds sweeping in from the ocean. Kassan had heard stories of powerful wind currents lifting entire teams of dogs off the ground, and there were other dangers too. Kassan had to be prepared at any moment to be attacked by deadly moose or other wildlife. In the town of Solomon, the telegraph operator put a message aside for Kassan's arrival. The message was from Nome Board of Health, and it confirmed that a violent blizzard was raging between Solomon and Nome. The message told Kassan and his team to stay in Solomon until the storm passed. A message was also sent to Musher Ed Ron, who was waiting with his team at port safety to take over from Kassan. Ron was ready to take the serum the short distance remaining to Nome, but since he believed the telegraph message meant that Balto and the team would not arrive until morning, Ron turned out the lights and slept. Chapter 10, On the Trail. As Kassan and his team headed west to Solomon, the wind whipped snow into their faces. It was hard to tell where the ground began and left off. The blowing snow painted everything white. Trail, sea, and sky looked identical. What little visibility Kassan had was gone. Between the darkness of night and the sheets of snow, he became disoriented. He could not see the trail at all. He wasn't sure in which direction Solomon lay. Then, to Kassan's surprise and dismay, his lead dog stopped and refused to go on. Noting the musher could get the dog to move forward. Reluctantly, Kassan changed the dog's position and put a new animal in the lead. That dog also refused to move. The musher had seen this sort of behavior before. He knew exactly why neither dog would lead. They could no longer pick up the trail through the high winds and blowing snow. In other words, they were lost. Then, in his position close to the rear, Balto strained in his harness and barked. Still crouching by the unmoving lead dog, Kassan looked at Balto. He could barely see through the haze of snow, but Balto's body language was clear. He knew which way to go. He knew the trail. Kassan didn't waste another minute. Once the dogs realized that a new leader had picked up the trail, they would follow him without question. Kassan unharnessed the second lead dog and put Balto in his place. Within moments, Balto was pulling the sled forward, quickly and confidently. Compared with his human musher, Balto didn't depend as much on his vision. Balto knew this trail. He knew its smells. He knew the feel of the land beneath his feet. Even in the blackest of night, with snow erasing all hints of the landscape, Balto could sense the sea to his left. He could feel the rocky spread of the Tepoke region to his right. He could recognize the presence of the Bonanza River several miles ahead. Clinging to the sled, Kassan marveled that Balto could even put one foot in front of the other. The wind screamed in Balto's face, but he did not turn from it. Instead, he strained forward, and the dogs behind him followed his example. Balto breathed in snow along with the bitter wind, but he only pulled harder. Kassan was relieved. He was completely lost, but Balto was not. Though by now Kassan could not even see the lead dog through the thick blowing snow. He could feel how confidently Balto was pulling. With every step, Balto was sending his musher a message. Trust me, I'll get us home. Kassan needed no convincing. He trusted Balto's instincts completely. After a time, Kassan stopped the sled and checked each of the dogs. He found that the blowing snow was freezing on their eyelids. Ignoring the cold, he crouched over each dog and gently wiped the ice and snow from its eyes. He went to Balto last. The lead dog was trembling, either from strain or from his eagerness to get going again. Kassan gave Balto's eyes one final rub and then took his place on the sled. Balto could not have heard Kassan calling commands over the howl of the storm, but he needed no direction. As soon as he sensed that Kassan was securely on the sled, he sped forward. In the heart of the blizzard, Kassan never saw the buildings of Solomon to their right. The town's lights and the shapes of its building had been erased by the snow. Inside one of those buildings was the message for Kassan from Nome Board of Health, telling him to wait for the blizzard to be over. Outside, Balto and the team ran on. Chapter 11, Passport Safety. 1 minute, guys, I gotta get a drink here. In spite of the storm, the team was making good time. Kassan guessed they were about 10 miles from port safety. He was hoping they would soon be safe and warm when suddenly the team came to a full stop. Kassan leapt off the sled. He kept one hand on the line connecting the dogs as he felt his way toward Balto. Powerful, blinding gust of wind had struck Kassan. If he became separated from the team, he might not find his way back to them. Running his hands from one dog to the next, he found Balto standing rigid. Kassan could not even see 8 inches in front of him, so he ran his hands over his lead dog to feel for a clue. Balto was not holding himself like a dog who had lost the trail. His body position showed that he sensed something dangerous ahead. Kassan ran his hands down Balto's legs. He immediately discovered the problem. Balto was almost up to his knees in water. They were on ice, and it had begun to give way. If Balto had taken 1 or 2 more steps, he would have gone through the ice. The dogs behind him, linked together by the harnesses, would have also gone down. Taking Balto's harness in one hand, Kassan led the team around to the left and back in the direction they had come from. Once they were safely away from the broken ice, Balto leaned forward in his harness to show he was ready to go on. So there's Balto, and you can see he's in that water, and that's where he had stopped. You see the ice around him, so he knew if he had gone any farther, the whole team, and you can see that they're connected by harnesses, would have fallen in. So that wouldn't have been a good thing, and the medicine couldn't have made it where it needed to make it. Kassan climbed back onto the sled. Balto carefully picked his way forward. After seemed like what was an eternity, Kassan felt the sled tip skyward as it pulled up a riverbank. Balto had found secure passage over the ice. For the moment, they were very safe. Invisible to Kassan, the trail inched closer to the sea on the port team's left. The team had to pull the sled out onto the ice of Norton Sound for a short distance before reaching port safety. The sled now seemed to be going over a fairly flat surface, so Kassan guessed that they might already be on the ice. It was not smooth going. The ice was taking a beating from the blizzard. The blowing wind was pushing it toward the barrier of the coast, forcing whole slabs up and on top of each other. Driftwood had been tossed up out of the ocean and lay everywhere. The dog team had to be very careful not to run into it. A fierce gust of wind tossed the sled high into the air as if it were a child's toy. Kassan felt the sled flying for what seemed like an eternity as he clung to the handles. Finally, he landed on the ice with a sickening thud. He skidded for many feet before coming to a stop. Still clinging to the sled, which was now on top of him, Kassan caught his breath as Balto barked anxiously. Kassan was shaken but not hurt, and he could tell by the sound of Balto's bark that the dogs were all right as well. They had been very lucky. Kassan climbed to his feet. Then he ran his hands over the dog's harnesses to make sure the lines were clean and untangled. Balto stood very still, understanding what needed to be done before they could go on. One of the other dogs impatiently leapt to his feet and began to pull. Balto barked and growled at him until the dog sat down again. Okay, and there's Balto and the dogs, and you can see where the sled had flipped over. When Balto kept the team in line, Kassan carefully turned the sled over into an upright position. Checking the runners, he was relieved to find that neither of them had been broken by the accident. In fact, the sled didn't seem to be damaged at all. They could head onto port safety without losing any more time. The musher quickly ran his hands over the back of the sled to make sure the crate of antitoxin was still tightly tied on. The dogs tensed as Kassan cried out in dismay. The crate was gone. Giving Balto a command to stay put, the musher dropped to his knees. Gripping a line leading back to the sled with one hand, he blindly felt his way over the snow and ice. He swiped furiously in the dark with his free hand. Every few seconds, he inched forward a foot or so and swept his hand in an arc through the snow. Finally, his groping hand connected with something solid and box-like. It was a miracle. In the midst of the darkness and snow, Kassan had found the crate. He dragged it back to the sled and tied it on. The worst of their troubles was behind them. They encountered no more obstacles. Balto led purposely, and the dog reached incredible speed. The winds died down a little. Kassan kept a lookout for port safety. Suddenly, he saw the port safety roadhouse where he was to transfer the serum to Ed Rohn and his team. All the lights were out. Kassan thought quickly. He knew that Rohn was probably at the roadhouse, but asleep. Rohn could be awake and have his team in their harnesses within an hour, but every second counted. And Balto never looked stronger or more determined. Clearly, the dog did not want to stop. Nome was just over 20 miles away. Balto's confidence decided the matter. The team sped by port safety without a backward glance. Several hours later at dawn, Balto and the team thundered into Nome. Slowing the sled to a crawl on Front Street, the dogs barked and howled in celebration. In Nome's tiny hospital, the light in Dr. Welch's office suddenly flicked on. Chapter 12, Nome Again. Within moments, Kassan, Balto, and the other dogs were surrounded by well-wishers. Helping hands unharnessed the dogs and untied the crate of antitoxin. The citizens of Nome cheered Kassan, but he kept shaking his head. It was Balto, he was telling them. It was Balto the whole time. Balto found the trail. Balto got them through. If it had been left to him, Kassan said they would have still be lost in the blizzard. Inside the hospital, the musher knelt over the crate as Dr. Welch eagerly pried it open. In spite of the accident, none of the vials were cracked or broken. Nurse Morgan had syringes ready for the first doses of the serum. Dr. Welch's and Nurse Morgan's expressions changed from excitement to concern when the first vial was taken out. The serum was frozen solid. They spent an anxious few minutes carefully thawing it. The serum seemed to be all right, but only time would tell. Within the day, it became obvious that the serum had remained effective in spite of having been frozen. Up and down the streets of Nome, in their houses and in the hospital, sick children were beginning to get better. The epidemic was finally under control. It had been just over 5 days since the serum had been carefully unloaded at the train station in Nenana. The entire country had followed the unfolding drama in newspaper reports. The world was triumphantly telegraphed across the United States that the relay teams had been victorious. The children of Nome were safe at last. So, and there's a picture, there's the nurse. You can see the fire there, that's them unthawing the serum. And they were hoping it worked because, as we learned last week when we were reading, they originally believed that if the serum froze, it wouldn't be effective anymore and it wouldn't work. So luckily, they were able to unthaw it and the serum worked and they were able to get it to folks. All right, part 2. Chapter 13, Around the Country. Balto was the most famous dog in America. He was given a special medal. People all over the country sent requests for appearances and ceremonies. When Leonard Sapala got back to Nome with Togo and his team, he had mixed feelings about Balto's newfound fame. Togo had pulled Sapala's sled over 250 miles round trip in the course of the relay. Sapala felt Togo should also be given some credit. It was a difficult situation for the famous musher. He felt as if one of his children had been rewarded over another. He was extremely proud of Balto, but for the rest of his life, he felt a pang of regret when he remembered how Togo's achievements had not been recognized. On February 9th, 1925, the New York Times ran a story that caused hearts to sink across the country. The headline read, "Balto, dog hero of the dash to Nome, is dead." In fact, Balto was very much alive and in extremely good health. The newspaper had made an enormous mistake reporting the death of Balto and most of the team from lung damage caused by the blizzard. The report was quickly corrected. In Nome, Leonhard Seppala received an offer from a filmmaker who wanted to make a movie about Balto and the team. With Seppala's permission, Gunnar Kassan took Balto and the dogs to Washington State, where the movie was filmed. There was a good deal more to come. It seemed almost every town in America wanted Balto to pay a visit. In New York City, the unveiling of Balto's statue was scheduled for December 15th, 1925. Balto and the musher traveled there for the ceremony, and Balto spent a curious moment staring at his bronze image, which towered over the crowd. Over the next year, Balto and his team crossed the country twice, making appearances at lecture halls and vaudeville houses alongside their musher. There was rarely an empty seat to be had when the famous dogs were on stage. Demand was still high a year later, but it was decided the dogs needed a rest. Traveling from state to state and visiting the eager crowds was hard for the animals. It was nothing like the life they had led in Alaska. In Los Angeles, the dogs were sold to a small museum. Reluctantly, Gunnar Kassan returned to Alaska alone. The dogs did not do well in LA. Balto was bewildered. The crowds were gone, and so was Kassan. For the first time in his life, Balto did not know what was expected of him. Unhappy and uncomfortable in LA's warm climate, the dogs grew very thin and sickly. They had been in the museum for over a month when a man named George Kimball, a vacationer from Cleveland, Ohio, guys, stopped in for a visit. Like most Americans, Kimball knew all about the heroic deeds of Balto and his team. He was horrified to see the dogs looking so unhappy. Kimball leapt into action. Through an exchange of telegrams with friends in Cleveland, he organized a committee to raise funds to buy the dogs. They would exceed over $2,000. This was an enormous amount of money in 1927. An appeal was made to the children of Cleveland. If each child donated all of his or her pennies to the fund, it might be possible to reach the goal. Across Cleveland, children emptied their piggy banks and sent their pennies in. There wasn't much time. Kimball needed to come up with the money within several weeks. He wasn't sure that Balto and his team's health would even hold up for that long. On the date Balto's owner said the money was due, as the last handfuls of pennies were coming in, the fund was counted. It totaled $2,342. Chapter 14, Cleveland, Ohio. On March 27, 1927, Balto and the team arrived in Cleveland. A new home was built for the dogs in the Brookside Zoo, which was then part of the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. There, Balto and his team were treated like royalty. Amid crowds of loving children, the dogs quickly grew fat and healthy. They got plenty of attention and food. They were also much happier in Cleveland's cooler weather. Although they were still Alaskan sled dogs at heart, they were now 7 or 8 years old, middle age for a dog. They enjoyed the retirement that they had so courageously earned. In 1933, at the age of 14, Balto died. It is said that 1 year of a dog's life is equal to 7 years of a human life. This would have made Balto 98 years old at the time of his death. A stuffed mount of Balto was made. It can be seen at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. Well over 70 years after Balto led his team and their musher into Nome, he is still captivating children and adults alike. When Balto came to his final home in Cleveland, he completed a circle he had begun in Alaska in 1925. Then it was the children of Nome who turned to Balto and the sled dogs for help. 2 years later, when it was Balto's turn to need help, the children of Cleveland came through for the dog and his team. Balto, Togo, and the hundreds of other dogs on the relay teams whose names have been forgotten are now honored today. Visitors to the Cleveland Museum of Natural History in New York City's Central Park may come just to see Balto, or they may stumble upon him accidentally. However, when they come upon the story, it is sure to stick with them. The story of dogs and children and how they helped each other when help was needed the very most. So, and there's just a picture of Balto at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. Afterward. Each year on the first Saturday in March, the famous Iditarod race is held. The world watches as the best dogs in Alaska retrace the route along which Balto and the relay teams pulled the antitoxin serum in 1925. Until 1999, each Iditarod musher was greeted by Edgar Noller, one of the original mushers of the 1925 relay, as the teams passed through the town of Galena. Noller was 20 years old when his dogs pulled the antitoxin 24 miles from Whiskey Point to Galena. Each year, he stood quietly near the Iditarod Trail as the racing team sped by. When he died in January 1999, the last participant in the Great Dash to Nome was gone. Now the story is truly in the hands of legends. And we've got an author's note here. It was both great fun and very frustrating to research this book on Balto. Not much has been written about this relay race to Nome, so I depended on newspaper reports that were written as the story unfolded. However, these reports were full of inconsistencies and sometimes mistakes. The sources didn't agree on exact dates and times. Even the names of the towns and mushers changed from story to story. From these articles, I've put together the facts as best I could. I also read books about men and women who have raced the Iditarod with their teams. These books helped me imagine the conditions the teams would have encountered in 1925. I also learned how a dog team works and how difficult it is to be a lead dog. Equally important were the Balto experts at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. Some of them have spent years collecting information about the race and its aftermath. They gave me the very important story of what happened to Balto. After all the excitement died down, the story of Balto is a great one, and I hope to have done it justice. So the story behind the story. So we got a little bit here. We'll have some pictures. This is pretty neat stuff. The Iditarod. In 1973, the first Iditarod trail sled dog race was run from Anchorage to Nome, almost 1,000 miles. It was started to remember sled dog culture and the dogs that made the serum run in 1925. Today, the race happens every March. So there's a picture of the Iditarod. It is one of Alaska's most popular events. Over 60 mushers compete each year. Mushers choose teams of 12 to 16 sled dogs. Altogether, around 1,000 dogs join the race. Balto and Gunnar Kassan would have been amazed by how fast today's sled dogs make the trip. In 2011, the winning team finished in 8 days, 18 hours, and 46 minutes. Here's a picture of sled dogs. If you see they're up on a rack, it keeps them up off the snow and the cold. In 1925, people lit gas lanterns to help mushers find their way through heavy snow. Now, when the Iditarod Trail sled dog race begins, a lantern called the Widow's Lamp is lit at the finish line. It stays lit until the last team safely arrives and is met by cheering fans. The Junior Iditarod is a race for mushers who are 14 to 17 years old. It is 150 miles long and follows parts of the Iditarod race. Young mushers from around the world train for months before the race. They compete for prizes and to celebrate the spirit and bravery of Alaska's sled dogs. And right here we have a girl, she's doing the Junior Iditarod. She was the Junior Iditarod champion. Right. Diphtheria. Diphtheria is what the sickness was that the children of Nome has, and it's going to give us a little bit about what diphtheria is here. Diphtheria is a serious infection that starts in the nose or throat. It then makes a blue-gray coating along the back of the throat. People with diphtheria have trouble breathing and swallowing. If it's not treated, it produces a poison inside the body that can be deadly. Diphtheria can spread quickly from person to person. Today, there is a vaccine that helps protect the body against the diphtheria toxin. And next up, we have Balto's statue. And they say a famous Brooklyn sculptor named Frederick George Richard Roth made the Central Park statue of Balto. First, Roth had Balto stand very still on 2 chairs so he could craft a small model. Later, the full-size statue was cast with bronze. On a cold day in 1925, Roth, Gunnar Kassan, and Balto joined a crowd of fans to unveil the statue. Kassan dedicated to Balto and all the dogs that helped him on the serum run. So there's Kassan and the real Balto, and there's the Balto statue. Picture of it on that first day. And there's another picture of the Balto statue. About the author and about the illustrator. And that is all of our Balto story. Let me stop sharing my screen here. Do you guys have any questions or anything you want to ask? All right, let's see here. Caitlin, I saw your hand up first.
It's a movie called Wire Call.
Yeah, there is a movie called Call of the Wild.
Yeah.
I think, yep. There's also an animated movie called Balto, obviously. That
I've seen it.
yep, yep, it's pretty good. All right, hold on. I see Alex on here. Oh, hold on, Alex. I accidentally muted you.
I
What's
like
up,
their
Alex?
story. Oh, what's up, Amanda?
Good. So, do you like it?
Good. Yep.
Yeah. So I'm actually gonna, let's see if I can pop it up, guys. I'm getting on to the Cleveland Museum of Natural History website. And I'm gonna see if it'll let me see the picture of Balto. So let me see if I can pull it up, because I'd love to be able to show you guys. Dusty, do you have a question?
How did that man create the Balto statue?
So you saw in the picture, he had Balto come into the art place, and they have Balto stand on 2 chairs, and he would have made a small statue out of clay or whatever while Balto was standing there. And then Balto could leave, and then he could make a big bronze statue out of it, going by the little statue that he made while Balto was there looking at it. So I think I found the Balto exhibit. Ha! Okay, so I found, let me share my screen again and I'll show y'all guys what I found. All right, so we have the Balto Museum. We're on the Cleveland Museum of Natural History website. And give me 1 minute so I can see everyone. I don't like not being able to see everyone. I got to make y'all a little bit bigger. There we go. So there's a picture. And right here is the is Balto, a replica of Balto that they have at the Museum of Natural History. I know a lot of people probably, when you think of Balto, you think of like the regular husky dog, huh? You think the gray and black. And if you look at Balto, he's more dark colored. He's got some white feet and a little patch of white there. But Balto doesn't look like the typical husky that you would think of when you think of sled dogs. So there's a picture of that. Let's see here. Balto. Let's see here. If I could find anything else. So Cleveland Red Legacy, that's what I wanted. On March 19th, 1927, Balto and 6 companions, so his 6 sled dog friends, were brought to Cleveland and given a hero's welcome in a triumphant parade through Public Square. The dogs were then taken to the Brookside Zoo, now the Cleveland Metro Park Zoo. Who here's been to Cleveland Zoo before? Has anyone here been to Cleveland Zoo? No, no, no. Jonah has. To live out their lives in dignity. It was said that 15,000 people visited the dogs on their first day at the zoo. And that's his mount. So I'm going to stop sharing there. And, you know, I really enjoyed looking at that and checking out, finding out about Balto. But so, yeah, it's interesting. You know, we talked a little bit last week for you guys that weren't here. You know, you see a lot of similarities right now with, you know, what we're going through with COVID and diphtheria, how it was so easily transmitted and it, you know, was a respiratory thing. And, you know, it's interesting how history seems to repeat itself. Luckily, we have more technology and things that we can do now to make us safer in the world. You know what I mean? They did have masks back then, but We have more medical stuff now and things to keep us safe. So I see Jonah here, and I think he's gonna. Oh, there's Aaron too. Hi, Aaron.
There we go. I was just muted, but back on. Thank you, Amanda. We appreciate your time here this morning. Balto's story. Alex, did you have a question? Hold on one second. There you go.
Hey, I'm in the park today.
Nice. Well, see if you can find
Yep.
a Balto there.
Yep.
Very cool.
All right. Yep.
Enjoy the
Bye,
nice day. It's
Amanda.
supposed to be beautiful.
Bye, Alex.
All right. Well, thank you, Amanda. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely.
See you soon.
See you guys soon.
All right. That wraps up our Steubenville segment to start our morning here on PALS TV. So we're going to take a short break. You can stay on here and hang out and talk amongst yourselves. I think you'll have the ability to come off of mute here while we break. And then we'll be back with our friends over at Together We Grow in about 15 minutes. So see you soon. Thanks, Amanda.